Hello, everyone. It's Perry here with another exclusive Collider interview. I am sitting with Todd Haynes, the director of Dark Waters. How are you doing? Are you just like running around like crazy right now?
We're running around a bit. It's all been good.
It's
How
nice.
You doing, Perry?
I'm doing very well. It's always nice to sit here and talk movies with just about anybody. But you are a filmmaker I deeply admire, and especially with this project here, it's a story that should be told.
Yes, that's exactly how I felt when it came to me.
So can you tell me a little bit about the process of this coming to you? Because I know that this had a very, very quick turnaround. So was that a new scenario for you, or is it something you've experienced?
It was crazy. When you actually think back that the thing that broke it was a New York Times expose from 2016. I mean, that's like yesterday, right? Although it describes a story that had been going on for 16, 18 years prior to that, and a campaign by DuPont that had been going on for what's probably now about 60 years with the production of Teflon. But this story quickly became something that Mark Ruffalo became aware of, and Participant Media. And Mark and Participant had worked on Spotlight not that long before. And people were coming to Mark, who's an activist and engaged in environmental issues and water issues, and said, "You got to look at this." And he did. And he immediately reached out to Rob Bilott, who is the lawyer from Cincinnati who the story is about and who Mark plays in the movie. And literally within a year after that story broke, 2017, there was a script. He sent it to me. I mean, this doesn't happen at this kind of speed in movies, right? You know this. And I know
what was the key to getting things going? I mean, is there any specific reason this got off the ground faster than other projects do?
I think they saw what incredible social relevance a story like this has, right? With everything that we're facing today. And the magnitude of the story is so shocking. From how it begins with a single sort of American beloved product, Teflon, and a famous chemical company behind it. How much it began just in sort of local issues of the water systems in the Midwest. And then it kept spreading and kept spreading and kept spreading because of our anti-regulatory system, and has ultimately spread across the globe. And PFOA, which is the chemical at issue in the story, is now in the blood of 99% of all living creatures
nightmarish
on the planet.
I
So
watch
it's nuts.
I watch so many horror movies. Like, this is the type of stuff that keeps me up at night.
Seriously. This is a true life horror story.
Have you been hearing a lot of comparisons to Erin Brokovich? Because very different stories and both very much well worth telling. But what would you say to someone out there who is thinking, well, I saw Erin Brokovich, why am I going to watch this one?
Erin Brokovich is a great film.
That it is.
A beautifully made film and a very engrossing story with an incredible and charismatic woman at the center of the story. In many ways, this is a more nuanced and subtle, and in some ways it feels more like the stuff of real life, even though, of course, Erin Brokovich is a true story, and she exists, and she had all of those qualities. But Rob Bilott is an unexpected hero. He's not the kind of guy that you expect to take on systems of power because he came from those systems of power. He was a criminal defense attorney defending the chemical industry. And believed in regulation and believed that there was a way that industry and regulation could coexist. And then sort of happened into all the great, I think, whistleblower stories are about people who come out who are in the dark. And the story starts to form and get bigger and more astonishing and more infuriating, right? And that rage fuels the fight.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happens with Rob.
I feel like these are very important, true stories to get out there. But I'm going to answer my own question. One of the things that I appreciate about having both of them, too, is they're two completely different types of individuals.
Yes.
When she walks into the room, she makes her presence known,
Absolutely.
whereas he is like much more quiet and keeps to himself. And I just feel like having both of those examples out there can tell anybody, it doesn't matter who you are, if you believe in this cause, you can make a difference.
Absolutely. And I think no one's seen Mark Ruffalo quite embody the skin and bones of a guy like this, of Rob Bilott. You know, someone emotionally guarded and kind of hunched over and kind of lost in a perpetual frown, who kind of finds his voice and finds his life's work through accidentally, right? Through circumstances that come upon him. You know, Erin Brokovich, you sort of think she'd be capable of anything the minute you meet her. Mark emerges through the character of Rob Bilott and sort of finds out who he is, you know, and I found that to be so moving and also so painful, because people who are out there truth-telling, they get stigmatized, right? And the power systems start to push back against them and threaten them, and they enter a perilous place, and that's what makes them even more astonishing, their work.
Did you always know that he was going to play the lead role? I mean,
did
he always know ever since he first signed on? Because I don't think we reported it until right around this time last year.
What's cool, I think, is that Mark wanted to shepherd this whole project into being from the vantage point of a producer, and really believed that the story needed to be told, and didn't want to sort of push himself necessarily as the leading sort of banner name attached to the actor. But he was, and that was always a given. But yeah, I swear to God, when people first see him in the movie, they don't even know it's Mark. We've even had people talk about the prosthetic makeup that he wears. Of course, he wears no prosthetic makeup. It's all acting.
There's something about the way he frowns, right? And it did make me think twice.
I know. It's really astonishing.
Did you see any of just, the physical preparation he went through to kind of make that happen?
Absolutely. I mean, what was so remarkable for me as a director, I think for the actors, for the entire creative team on the movie, is that we surrounded ourselves with the real people. We were in the real places. We were in Cincinnati. We visited West Virginia. We had these people on set. They were our advisors, and they cross the class divide from an Appalachian farmer outside of Parkersburg, West Virginia, all the way to the guy who ended up becoming the managing partner for Taft Law, one of the most prestigious law firms in the country, and definitely in the Midwest, and played by Tim Robbins. But it was so remarkable to see Rob spending so much time with Mark, and Mark watching him and internalizing him and interpolating him, And the other amazing thing is to watch the real Rob Bilott start to uncoil himself as this was happening. He started to kind of come out of his shell and feel the weight of the world lifting from his shoulders, because finally his story is going to be told and seen by the world vis-a-vis Mark Ruffalo, right? And this film, and he starts to look like this. You see how handsome he is, and how he has a little glint in his eye, and there's almost nothing that made us feel better about watching us relieve him of the burden that he'd been carrying single-handedly for so many years.
What a wonderful kind of like 1-2 punch with his work. It's like he did accomplish so much, but now the fact that this movie exists, it's like a whole nother wave of it.
Exactly. I mean, he said to me when the New York Times article landed, he said to me and Mario Correo, the writer, one of the writers on the script, when we drove with him from Cincinnati to Parkersburg, he said, when that article landed, I knew at least they weren't going to kill me. Like the isolation these kinds of people are put into, the danger zone that they enter into, the physical illness that he acquired, which still was never sufficiently diagnosed. And you're taking on one of the biggest chemical companies in the world. It's hard to not have some conspiratorial or paranoia attached to that. But yeah, so yes, this relieved him and unburdened him in ways that we still see.
Hearing you describe so many of those features of him is making me think of a lot of your past work, just like the idea of dealing with isolation and someone dealing with like something that's physical and they can't really put a finger on what it is. Do you think that this movie kind of landed in your lap at the perfect time, or do you think you could have made Dark Waters, 10, 15 years ago?
It's funny, Mark has been sort of responding to that very question in Q&As we've been having. And I agree with him that sometimes there's sort of a zeitgeist that almost beckons projects to come to the fore at the time that they do. You know, there's something in the air that makes them necessary to happen when they happen. And I do feel like just the environmental issues that our country is confronting, and heading into an election year, and the ways that our regulatory system has so catered to the needs of industry, and how much money and big business have dominated our economy. These are all things that make this an incredibly relevant story to tell, and something that really we all felt really needed to be told. And that's one of the reasons why it was happening. It happened as quickly as it did.
It was interesting seeing this so soon after I went to TIFF and I saw that documentary that Ellen Page had made. It is about environmental racism. It's called There's Something in the Water, and it's her back in her hometown in Halifax and just exploring that. And I don't like, they're different scenarios, but they go hand in hand, and it just shows how widespread these issues are.
Exactly. Flint, Michigan. I mean, just on and on and on.
Yeah.
We can go on and attach these relevant stories because it's a systemic problem. And you're going to see all kinds of specific examples cropping up in all these different places. And you can only focus on one thing at a time. And we wanted to enter this story dramatically and with compassion about the people involved, and make it something that people could really experience and feel for.
Yeah. What is it like condensing? I mean, I guess this was essentially almost 2 decades worth of research and work, because you can't fit it all in there. So was there any specific part about, what happened in this whole process that you just hope people know about that maybe you couldn't include in the movie?
I think we hit the main points. I mean, there's no question, exactly as you state. A complicated legal narrative like this. Rob Bilott has actually just written a book called Exposure that really compellingly lays out the far more complex full story. And we had the dramatic task of trying to make it into something that could be experienced by an audience in a single viewing, where I think the best kinds of whistleblower films, you follow the overall momentum and the trajectory forward. And then the 2 steps back, 1 step forward process that always happens, right? But you can't possibly maintain and understand every single aspect of either the legal discourse or the journalistic discourse, if that's the theme of the film. But it's all there. And you feel like it's being supported on solid ground. But that's not really the point. The point is to watch this overall progression that real people take and risk their lives over. And I think that's what we tried to accomplish.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As far as the journalism and the legal jargon goes, though, is there any particular bit that you found the hardest to convey clearly, where you had to workshop it a little in order to get it to screen the best way?
This was really the brainchild of Mario Correa, the second screenwriter who came on. Our first screenwriter got busy shooting a movie of his own, and we brought Mario in, and it was fantastic. But the centerpiece of the film is really the presentation of the story that Rob has investigated through the discovery process. That really is the shocking backstory of DuPont and Teflon, right? They're knowing history of polluting and dumping the toxic byproducts of PFOA into the water systems and into the air. And so you see him going through all the material and researching, but you're kind of kept at a distance from it. And then finally he lands in his kitchen one night with his wife, and he's throwing away his Teflon. And she's like, "Rob, what's going on?" And he says, "I got to tell you what's been going on." And they sit down at the kitchen table, and he starts to tell her the story. And it sort of intercuts it goes back to his process of discovering the story and putting it all together, but he tells it first to Sarah, and then we intercut with him telling it to Tim Robbins, and then to Victor Garber, who plays the lawyer from DuPont. And it's it's sort of the centerpiece of the film, but it's so important, and I think what we wanted to feel is that the audience was ready to hear this story when it finally lands. How
many times do you get to shoot a scene as intense as that? Because that, to me, is one of the highlights for Mark Ruffalo and also for Anne Hathaway from a performance perspective. But it looks like, that's one of those things where it takes a lot out of someone. So
absolutely.
Is it, try to shoot that and get it in the can as quick as possible?
Well, the sheer amount of lines that Mark had to memorize and present to her, but do it in balancing that thing where he's not an actor, He's not an activist. He's a lawyer. And he's in the present tense of his own discovery process. And so we wanted him to be very present and very measured about the way he described it and told it to his wife. But he had to recite pages of dialogue. And I just couldn't. I sat there and I was like, holy shit, he has it all. He's done it. He's done this. He's so prepared. I mean, the guy is so conscientious and so devoted and such an incredibly warm and, just sympathetic and empathetic presence on set.
I feel like you can totally tell.
You can, right?
When someone has that quality, I feel like no matter what role they're in, it kind of radiates off the screen and you feel it.
That's really true.
Definitely feel it from him.
Yeah.
How do you go about, as far as the visuals go, making, rifling through papers something, exciting? And even boardroom scenes. You have a couple boardroom scenes that really just, up the energy of the movie when you're essentially just shooting a whole bunch of people sitting at a table.
Yeah. I tried to sort of set up this style, this visual style, this visual language, the sort of temperament of the movie that had a sort of restraint, that had a sort of emotional coolness, because it reflected Rob. And it also reminded me of the way some of my favorite films, like from the 1970s, that Gordon Willis shot, with Alan Pakula, Parallax View, Klute, and of course All the President's Men, among all the other amazing things he shot in the 70s, have this observational sort of elegance. And it trusts the performers. The frame trusts the performances and the material and lets the frame come alive with what's happening with great actors. And I had great actors. And I looked at those movies for inspiration and sort of feeling secure. Yeah, we can trust our audiences. We don't have to cut and be all flashy and And I think that comes through, and I think it's true to Rob Bilott.
This is like one very specific thing that I notice, and I hope I can kind of pinpoint the right scene without spoiling it for everybody. But there's one particular boardroom scene where Tim Robbins has an exceptional moment, and it's a moment that I would assume a director would be getting closer and closer and closer on the person talking in order to up the intensity. But no, you in the heat of his speech, you go back to a wide shot and see the whole room.
Right.
I'm just curious, what was the thought behind that particular choice? Because I was surprised how well that played.
Yeah, thank you. That's nice. It was a long and complicated scene with many different parts. It's really also where Rob really is there to convince the partners at his firm to take on this massive class action case. This is a law firm that had never taken on a class action case. They're not plaintiff's attorneys. They're defense attorneys. And so it took a lot of convincing, and it was going to challenge the reputation of what this law firm stood for. And so we covered it amply. It's a 5-minute long scene in the movie. But I was always so happy to hear when we were testing the movie and we were showing it to audiences that one of their favorite scenes of the film was this one. It was the least visually, potentially the least visually compelling. But I think the framing works. The triangular room that it was reflected by the actual interior of the true Taft offices, this architecture that I loved, that we honored in the set we built to match that. But really, it's the performances.
It is.
It's William Jackson Harper, it's Tim Robbins, and it's Mark Ruffalo.
William Jackson Harper's having quite the year too. I love seeing him pop up all over the place.
Oh my God, he's so lovely. He
can
do anything.
That particular scene, it's like what he's saying. It's so important for the entirety of the company that it wasn't until after I watched it that I'm like I needed that.
Yeah.
I needed to feel the impact of that on every single person around that table.
Absolutely.
And I just love that particular shot.
You,
I also really wanted to ask you about working with participant media. And this is a very convoluted way to ask this question, but it's we're constantly talking now about movies getting, the budget to make it on the big screen. And it's only the biggest of the big and not these small movies. But Participant is a company that is always making movies with purpose and always helping to fund movies with value like that. So what was your experience like working with them? And where do you see them going as a company in the future that could help the film industry?
Well, they're so rare as a studio that has the mandate of social justice themed films. I mean, that's an extraordinary thing just there. We can all stop for a second and go, wow, that's extraordinary, right? But the fact that they've had tremendous success in many of these films, I mean, even just last year between Green Book and Roma, they're very, very different films.
Yep.
And maybe they divided or separated audiences, but you can't not admire the fact that both of these films pass through the hands of a participant, right? And they've been involved with Spielberg's films that have had social themes to them, and they acquire documentaries and they create documentary material, and so the breadth of their commitment is so serious and so evident in the films that they've done. But thank God they've also had success, and that can fortify that mandate and take it further.
Absolutely. I mean, between them and Focus Features, it's like the second you put their name on a movie, you're going to get my attention.
Absolutely. I've been very, very lucky to stumble into that duo.
For sure. One of the questions that I've gotten in the habit of asking a lot of directors now, because someone recently brought up to me, it's like when you're an actor, you get to act on set opposite your peers and see how other people work. That doesn't necessarily happen with a director. So if you had the opportunity to be a fly on the wall of another director's set, who would you choose and why?
Man. Living, dead?
It could be either.
Oh, no. That's too hard. That's crazy.
I think the last person I spoke to picked, I think it was Kubrick.
Right. Oh, wow. I mean, it's a hard one to settle on. I'll pick somebody more obscure.
Okay.
I would have Kubrick on my list. I would have Hitchcock on my list. I would have Scorsese on my list. No doubt. But Max O'Fools is one of my favorite filmmakers, and he was idolized by Kubrick. And Kubrick described Max O'Fool's camera as something that floats through walls. And Max O'Fools worked in Europe, and he did a handful of films in America, and then he went back to Europe and did his final film, Lola Montez, at the sort of the very end of the 1940s. But the films are so – no, I'm sorry, it was the 50s. The films are so exquisite, the way they're crafted. He also attracted very awesome, progressive-minded writers and actors to do extraordinary things together, bigger scale and smaller scale, in Europe and America. Letters from an Unknown Woman, Reckless Moment, and Caught are the three movies he made in America back-to-back in the 40s. And they are just among my favorite films. I can watch them over and over again, and I learn something every time.
It's one of the best kinds of movies right there.
Completely.
Thank you so much for your time today, guys.
Carrie,
Dark Waters in theaters November 22nd. It's a good day. It's my birthday. So
it's Mark Ruffalo's birthday.
I didn't know I was like...
It's Mark Ruffalo's birthday,
I didn't know
Perry.
I shared a birthday with Mark Ruffalo.
That's not bad.
I will
you don't learn that every day.
Happily take it.
Scorpio.
All the good vibes going to your movie right now.
So I'm down.
Check it out when it hits theaters again. Thank you so much for your time today. We are going to have more exclusive Collider interviews coming your way real soon.